Today at the SNP party conference, Nicola Sturgeon presented herself as some sort of Pollyanna-ish uniter. Despite being one of the most divisive policies in recent political history, Scottish independence, she laughably insisted, would bring the nations of the United Kingdom closer together. What sparked this wave of niceties from the nastiest political leader in Britain? Well, it was this revealing moment on the BBC yesterday, when scheming Sturgeon unwittingly showed her true colours.
Who would you rather have as Prime Minister?
Well, that's not a difficult question. I mean, if the question to me is, would I prefer a Labour government over a Tory government? I detest the Tories and everything they stand for, so it's not difficult to answer that question.
And she wonders why Liz Truss hasn't picked up the phone. Of course, if such a phrase had been uttered by someone on the right, there would be overwhelming outrage about extremism sweeping British politics. But as ever, the Be Kind left don't give a damn if hate is directed at those they disagree with. It was left to Scottish Tories to rightly point out just how dangerous such rhetoric is. This is what Scottish MP Russell Finlay had to say.
First Minister, your words are dangerous, and I fear the day when they incite nationalist violence. How dare you both? How about you start trying to fix Scotland's many problems instead of stoking division and hate?
Donald Cameron, the Scottish Tory Shadow Constitution Secretary, added, Nicola Sturgeon should be more careful and respectful in the language she uses. Responsible politicians should be able to disagree without resorting to inflammatory language about hating their opponents. By saying she detests the Conservatives and everything we stand for, she is, by inference, insulting the 630,000 plus Scots who voted for us at last year's Scottish Parliament elections. Ruth Davidson, the former Scottish Tory leader, tweeted with Nicola Sturgeon's detest the Tories line earlier, there is clearly a rhetoric-raising strategy this SNP conference in order to other and traduce a quarter of the Scottish voting population. As usual, though, what I think Sturgeon is really doing is masterfully distracting from the real issues at hand, like the fact a majority of Scots are opposed to her plans to hold a second referendum on independence next year, according to a new poll by Survation. Like the fact Sturgeon is being called out by J.K. Rowling for being a destroyer of women's rights over her self-ID ban. And like the fact she crumbles at the slightest hint of media scrutiny about her delusional plans, as in this rare moment from Peter Smith of ITV News, who riled her by pointing out her rank hypocrisy over independence and then embarrassing her by exposing her complete inability, actually, total inability, to name one expert who supports the case for independence. Watch.
Should people be wary of political leaders who plough on with what they personally believe is right, even when the experts warn that it will be disastrous for the economy, pensions and mortgages?
I'm trying to wonder where you're going with this question. I mean, I think you need to get a bit more subtle in your prefaces to questions, of course, because that's not what I'm doing in terms of an independence referendum. But
there are experts who say that would be disastrous.
Yeah, sure, and there's experts that say the other thing, and we weigh these things up.
Which experts say that independence would boost mortgages and pensions and the economy?
Well, I'm not going to get into naming names of, but this is a decision. The thing here is
I
independence.
haven't met any of them.
Well, maybe you need to get out a bit more.
How incredible to finally see Sturgeon receive the sort of challenges from the MSM that has been desperately lacking for many years. I mean, for the past 2 years, I have implored others to ask Sturgeon about post-independence monetary policy, for example, because she doesn't come on this show and she bans any member of the SNP coming on this show, unbelievably. Peter actually did it.
Your policy on currency would tie Scotland to the monetary policy of the UK, which you've derided.
We would continue to use the pound, which is our currency as much as it is the rest of the UK's, for a period while we established a Scottish Central Bank. I'm not trying to convince you, no one will ever convince you that independence is a bad thing, First Minister, but can you at least be honest with people on this point, that if Scotland were independent right now, under the monetary policy and economic policy that you're proposing, it would be really, really bad for people. You wouldn't have any control over inflation. You'd be exposed to the storm without any shelter. Peter, people in Scotland have no control over these things right now.
But you have representation.
Independence would give us the ability to chart our course to a point where we do have control over these things.
Oh, what rubbish. Let's just be clear. There is no plan. Sturgeon's vision of a financially independent Scotland is nothing more than a mirage. But as she told the conference today, she doesn't care. She doesn't care as long as she stays in power.
For as long as I am First Minister. And by the way, conference, I intend that to be for quite some time yet. If the court decides in the way we hope it does, on 19th October next year, there will be an independence referendum.
So that desire to stay in power with no credible plan for delivering independence is why all she can do is spread anti-Tory hate and hope Scots are happy to overlook what a terrible job the SNP have done of governing. As The Spectator's editor Fraser Nelson wrote today, how many politicians say they actually detest their rivals? Why invoke hatred as a motivating political force? And isn't it hard to do so if you pose as an inclusive, warm, smiling party?